Hey guys, Darren Kai, Coach of Wise Pods, and welcome back to another trade mode heading into round 5 of the AFL Fantasy season. Gather around. It's going to be a busy weekend for a lot of us content creators, as a lot of people will be in Adelaide and catching up a fair bit. I know I'm going to the DT Talk show, the live show Thursday, and then that private show on Friday as well. So going to be a pretty busy weekend. So this video will be a bit longer than what my normal trade mode videos are going to be, as I'm not going to be have enough time to do my usual captains video tomorrow. So I'm going to put them both in one. So if you're interested in captains, please stay tuned to the end of this video, as I'll be going through a bit of that as a bit of a shorter version this week, as I'm running out of time just a little bit. But let's jump straight into trade mode this week, talking about trade outs to start off with. I think it's a pretty straightforward week for trades, honestly. Well, most of us have the Tim English issue. He is by far my number one trade out target. Obviously, MCL injury is not great. It can be a significant amount of time depending on how bad the strain actually is. We haven't heard just yet how long it's going to be, but what we do know, he is definitely confirmed out for this weekend coming up against Hawthorn. He hasn't travelled, so he's not going to be here. But it more than likely is look like it's going to be a 3-week minimum, which once it's that sort of 3 weeks, it's definitely a trade out for me. 2 weeks is like it's borderline. Like yes, it's going to take a bit of a hit, but if you really want him for the rest of the run and you think he'll come back better than what he finished off with, then no dramas. But I'm pretty confident that it's going to be 3 weeks plus, if not even longer, with just how he was hobbling on that right hit that knee of his. Even like after the day after when he was going to get scans, he was still very proppy. So I just don't see that recovering anytime soon. And obviously, we know Ruckman. They need to use their knees quite a lot, and they put their knees through a lot of strain with obviously with the leaping and jumping and whatnot they do. So I don't see him back anytime soon. So by far, he has to be traded out in my opinion, and I'm also in that same boat. So I've traded him out. But the question mark is, who do you go to, which we'll get into in a little bit. But number 2, I still have Darcy Parish. I know a fair few people still held him through last weekend. Yeah, he's gone from a pick that wasn't sort of anything previously now to starting to drop some cash. So he's now dropped 40k for the season, dropped the 19 on the weekend after a very poor 56 points against the Western Bulldogs. Just time on ground is just really becoming an issue. 66%, really poor. Again, not doing anything other besides getting disposals, not hitting scoreboard, not really getting tackles or marks. So he's becoming a problem. So if you can move off him, that's where my preference would be. He's got enough money on his head that you could sort of sideways him to a lot of the other value options. If you did have some DPP, that would be very nice to go to those mid-price options in the defensive line. But there's also a couple decent options in the midfield as well that could definitely be viable. So here's my number 2. Number 3, I do have Blackstone. He's not hurting you just yet. But he will maybe start to hurt you very shortly if he isn't dropped this weekend, with Nick Bryan potentially back from his injury. I do expect he probably gets one more week in the VFL before he returns. But yeah, 33 on the weekend, up against a Western Bulldogs side where they didn't have English for the second half. Sort of looked like he lost the role in the back half of that game as well, where Peter Wright was doing a lot more the ruck work. So that wasn't great signs for me that, you've had this guy who's been your number 1 ruck for all season so far, just due to the circumstances at the club. But then he lost it as soon as the opponent ruck was down, so it just didn't really make sense to me. I thought he was going to take an opportunity there to start really pushing his score up in the right direction, but just went into a key defender role and just really didn't do anything from that point onwards. That could be a bit of a correlation with what's his name, Reed, going down with an injury, so he sort of had to take that key defender role from him. But he's out for an extended period of time, so does Blackstone start to fill that role? Do they bring a Vizentini in of the Vizzo variety from Essendon to fill that role for a couple of weeks until Brian is ready, or do they just start to fill Brian in there straight away? So we'll keep an eye on that one. But yeah, I think Blackstone just has to go. He's been a bit of a failed pick. Only made about 50k for the season and been really disappointing, only averaging 48 from his 4 games where we were hoping he was going to be at least a 60, if not even push 70s with some, decent ability. The Ruck rules really do suit him in the sense that, he's very athletic, but his ruck craft is just kind of atrocious. So he was giving way too many free kicks away. Got better as time went on, but again, that role sort of diminished as he went. So he is definitely number 3 for me. Then I have number 4 as sort of like these cashed up rookies. So this can be a variety of different players. Carroll was one that a lot of people jumped off last week, so if you still hold him, he's another one that can still go. Break him at 30 now, so he's not going to make a huge amount of money from here. If he even holds his spot, we're still yet to hear if he's going to, but at most he might make another 20, 30k if he can put up a decent 60. But from that point onwards, it's not going to be much. So I think he's one that you can jump off pretty comfortably. Sharp, if you have him, yep, you can still jump off there. 31 break even as well. Been a bit of a failed rookie pick, so if you still own him, he's another one you can jump off. Watkins, you can jump off if you wanted to. I still think it's probably 1 week too early. Assuming he holds his spot, right? There's no guarantee of that after a poor performance last weekend with just the 21 points. But yeah, he could easily turn it around if he does get selected again. So my preference would be to hold him if you can. But yeah, if you wanted to just jump off, particularly if you get shopped, then yeah, no issues there. He does have a fair bit of money on his head. Lombard is another one. Higher break even, 22 as well. He's probably only got 1 or 2 weeks left in him at most, I would have thought, and probably only going to make another 20, 30k at most. So he would probably require a pop score to get him going again after a 47 and a 36 sort of back-to-back. So that's really stalled his cash generation after the first 2 weeks. But against the Sydney Swans, I just don't see that happening. They're a good opponent, so I don't think he'll get the freedom that he's been allowed to have against some of the easier opponents he has faced so far this season. So yeah, he's another one that can definitely go. And yeah, a host of other players that you can move off of. Even a Blamires, probably 1 week too early, or even a couple. But if he's, if you get off him and he gets you up to that player that you're looking for, then I have no issues with that either. But because he has been sort of pushed more to a wing than he is halfback at the moment, with just a few magnets rolling around back there. So yeah, I don't know if his scoring potential is going to be as good as what we have seen so far this season, and I do have some concerns about him being on field this week for some people, especially up against Brisbane Lions. It is a tougher matchup across the board, so keep an eye on Blamires there. So that's my number 4. Number 5 is more the luxury sort of trades that you sort of, the ones that are sort of frustrating you the most. Like a lot of people have a Butters, so if you're not comfortable with him, he is probably going to cop a bit of attention this week. He's been very underwhelming so far this year, besides the one decent score he put up against Essendon, which we know how good at the matchup they are. He's always going to be attention coming to him no matter what week, so he's got probably either a Garcia or a Wintager coming to him this weekend. They probably will start with the Garcia, then if that's not working, then they might go to a Wintager to really shut him down. Not seeing any attention from the Hawks boys. They might just put a Butler or something like that. They've started to use him as a bit of that run with sort of tag. Not a super restrictive tag, but someone just to keep him more accountable. Then you've obviously got potentially a Mullen that could do that sort of tagging role in the midfield for the Cats. He does more of the half-forward sort of tags, though, so I wouldn't be surprised if they don't run with it. But we have seen Mullen, really, really hurt Butters in the past, keeping him to 30, 40s, I think, in the past. So that is concerning. So if you wanted to, and you had the luxury to jump off, yeah, I definitely could see a world that Butters goes. Same with your more unique guys. Like I know Caldwell's sort of frustrating a lot of people at the moment. So if you are again in a bit more of a luxurious position, a guy like a Caldwell could definitely go. He's dropping a lot of coin now with a 41k on the weekend, dropped over 100k so far this season, with just some very poor and underwhelming scores. And that's not due to him; it's more due to Essendon just being a very poor scoring team at this stage. So here's another one. And Walsh is sort of the other one that I had sort of pricked up in this position. Is yes, he had a poor performance with the 78 after, being a bit mess so far this season. But I'm just worried about the role that he played in that game against North. Yes, he was tagged, but he just dropped a lot of CBAs with Chera coming back into the side. So I'm just worried, is that going to be his role going forward as that sort of that fourth midfielder, spending a bit more time out on the wings or as half forward? And that's not what we want. We want a Sam Walsh who's 70 to 80% time on ground. Sorry, in the midfield and time on ground, and that's sort of the winning combination for him to be that sort of primo scoring ruckman. Sorry, why do I keep calling ruckman? Primo scoring midfielder who we know he can be, but hasn't sort of lived up to that hype just yet. With again, a bit of a mess start of the season so far, even with some decent matchups to go with it. So he is another one that I'm starting to get concerned with and starting to head in the wrong direction with a higher break even this weekend and a tougher fixture to start up and could start to see some attention very shortly. So keeping an eye on him, but I think with all the other carnage, I'm going to be forced to hold him this week. But a few other options, depending on the extent of Ed Richards' injury, I probably wouldn't be trading out of him just yet. I feel like it's just going to be 1 week, but I'm not 100% guaranteed on that just yet. Yeah, he was a very late out for that Essendon matchup, so it sounds to me like he was close enough to playing. Just didn't quite get up, so I wouldn't be surprised if I see him get up this weekend. But he is dealing with a knee concern, so that there are some concerns there that could be a long time. I wouldn't be jumping off Windsor, particularly this weekend against Essendon. We know how good of an Essendon matchup are across the board, particularly for midfielders, though. They are the number one matchup for midfielders, particularly. We've seen where's my run sheet here? So we've seen Bont go 130, Sheezer go 136, Butters go 144, and even a guy like a Ward at Hawthorn go 107. So all very good scores across the board for a lot of the midfielders, and that's just the top scorers of each of those sides. There was just obviously guys below them, like in LDU, like Kennedy, and whatnot there that were all going quite well. Even a Rosie before he went down his halftime score, he was on track for a massive score as well. So every midfielder seems to score quite well. So I think Windsor's in for another decent one. Should be a 70 plus quite comfortably. So I think he'll still make a bit of coin this weekend coming up. So I'll be holding on to him. Spoke about all these guys. Doverson's still in that category of number 4, cash rookies. Not that he's made him a catch, but he got rested on the weekend. If you got Petrarca, I'd probably be holding there now. Same with Dacos. Both of them guys can go in the same category. Dacos is a little laid out. He looks like he's training a lot better this weekend. So he should be good to go for the game. Same with sort of Petrarca. He's probably ruled out for this week. I think that's almost but confirmed. But he'll more than likely be back next week. So yes, you've held for 3 weeks. One through the bye, which doesn't hurt you too much, but 2 weeks on the sidelines isn't too bad. So I think you can definitely hold him there, unless you fully believe he's not going to be as good as what he has shown in the first couple of games, where he, obviously put up a couple decent scores there before his injury. But he does roll into Essendon the week after, so you probably want him for that matchup as a bit of a reward, because he could definitely have a massive field day there. So we saw what Heaney was able to do. I'd fully expect Petrarca to be able to do the exact same sort of thing with a 120 plus score. So if I had Petrarca, I'd be holding him this weekend to then use him next week and save that trade, because you probably will have to trade him back in at some stage anyway. So that is sort of the trade out targets. Again, a few other guys like a Lawler. He can go. Selwood still fell in the same category as number 4, and all these other guys are a bit more unique now. So that's the trade out category. Hopefully that answers all your questions. Let's move into the trade in categories, and again we'll start with the forward line, because I don't think many people are looking here this week. I think a lot of our teams are sorted in this space. Where can I find it? So my number 1 trading target for the forward line is still Rochelle. Yes, he's more expensive now. You're paying an extra 42k than what we did last week. He's gone up nearly 140k for the season, so it is significantly more expensive than what people that started him are. But he is showing a real ability to score and score well. That he's at a decent price point with a decent run of fixture, that I'd rather save the 100, 150k, even 300k to, a guy like a Myers who's in this list, even a Cozzy Pickett who's nearly 950. You're nearly saving 200k there to go to someone that is probably going to be within 5 points of those guys, or maybe 10 points for the rest of the season. So I'd just go to Shelley quite comfortably. He's got a good run of fixture for at least to the mid-season buys, which is where you can probably look to move him off if he's not being a part of that top 6 forwards that he could definitely be. At this stage, he's averaging 92, which is well and truly inside that top 6 at this stage. But again, DDPs will come out in a week's time, and then we'll start to reassess. Okay, who sort of pops their head in there? A lot of people are looking at Took Miller and whatnot, somewhat. So other people may show up. So I think Rochelle's definitely still the number one guy in the forward line. Then I've got Murphy Reed again, saving another 100k from a Rochelle. So if you wanted to go that, 100k cheaper, Murphy Reed's probably a little bit of a different category though, because I don't see him being a top 6 forward for the year. I sort of expected him to be a 75 to 80 averaging player. He's averaging just over 80 at this stage with some decent scoring. But he's just super consistent, He's consistently hitting 70s, so he's moving up in cash generation. He's got a break even of 40, gone up over 100k so far this season. The role looks great, and he's got Collingwood this weekend, which we know they like to concede a lot of marks. So I'm hoping that Murphy Reed can get amongst those marks, and as they like to use the ball quite well. So I could see him having quite a big day against Collingwood there at Adelaide Oval on the Friday night. So I think he'll go quite well. So here's my number 2. Then I've got a couple other options that are a bit more expensive. Just so, like, if you didn't want to mess around, maybe you had the coin laying around, you didn't want to play the value game, you just wanted to pay up, get the guys that you know are going to be best of their line for the rest of the season. That's Cozzy Pickett at number 3. He's got the Essendon matchup this weekend, so very similar to a Bontempelli last week. A lot of people jumped on him for just a bit of a pop score. 100% could expect a Cozzy Pickett to go 120 this weekend, as Bont and Heaney sort of done in the past. So yeah, these guys are just going to thrive on this matchup. He's got the right role. He's playing full-time midfield. Depending on, matchups, he only spent a little bit of time outside the midfield in round 2, and that was due to a Tholstrup doing a bit of a tagging role. So it sort of meant they had to sort of spread the load where other people had to spend more time outside the ground, outside the mid, and that what led to a Cozzy Pickett spending a bit more time forward in that game. But yeah, that's just gonna, you're gonna have the ups and downs with Cozzy Pickett, right? He's gonna spend a bit of time forward where he may not kick as many goals, but he's also up and around the ground a fair bit. So I think he's a decent option at number 3. Again, you're paying for what you're gonna get. He's priced at about 97, 98 roughly, and I don't expect him to average that for the season. I think he's going to be more that 95 guy, very similar to what he was last year. As I just don't see quite the improvement in his game. His role is the exact same as what it was last year. It's just whether you think Melbourne have increased their in scoring as an overall team, so that market share can get him over the line. But yeah, he'll be somewhere around that sort of mark. So I don't think you're paying overs for him. You're paying about what is fair value, I'd say. So I think he's a decent option at number 3. Number 4, probably paying overs, and that's Grind Myers. But again, you got the nice matchup against West Coast, so expecting a fully decent score against them after what was probably a poorer game against Hawthorn. He really saved that score in the second half. I think he had a 62-point second half. Was on a very dirty, like 23 points at the half of that game, but yeah, just sort of got across the line. So yeah, he's going to be a hard watch at some stages when he does come against tougher matchups. But again, if you just wanted to pay up, get the best guy you can in that line and not mess around with his mid prices that you may have to move on at some other stage, then go with a Grind Myers at number 4. And then I've thrown in a Tom Sparrow. He's getting a bit of love this week. I did speak about him a couple weeks back. I still just don't have too much confidence in this pick because he has shown this before where, he had a patch in the midfield where he can go quite well because, he's a midfielder and he's a bit of a ball in there. He can get a lot of tackles. But it's the weeks where he doesn't get the possessions along with the tackles is where he really struggles, and he can drop a dirty sort of 60 on you quite comfortably. So I just don't know if I'd be going there. The time on ground's a bit lower than what I'd want as well. And he has had some very good matchups recently that have bolstered his scoring ability. You know, these two teams, particularly even the last three teams, are very contested heavy, where they concede a lot of tackles, which is thriving for a guy like Thomas Barrow. But if you wanted to throw a bit of a Harry Mary out there, you're definitely doing it in the forward line. So again, he is priced cheap enough. He's got a great matchup and he's got the right role, so you could definitely go there. That's why I slotted him at number 5. But I still, you're paying less for a Murphy Reed, who I expect to be better long term, probably a bit more of a safer pick than what I think of Thomas Barrow is. So that's just where I sit with the forwards. A couple other guys here. I won't talk on the rookies just yet. I might do that just after this. But Fraser, I spoke about him a little bit last week because again I fully expected him to go quite well with the absentees of Libba, and then obviously the late out of Richards meant there was just midfield minutes up for grabs for everyone in that team. Sanders was in there as well, as long as a Fraser, and we know when these guys get the opportunity in there, they're going to score quite well. It's just whether that is going to be sustainable for a long term, and I just don't see that happening. Libba's was 2 to 4 weeks prior to last week, so he's probably again another 3 weeks away. So that will be coming straight back into the side once he's fully fit. You've got Trelaw waiting in the wings. Once he's fully fit, we could see him return as soon as this weekend. So I just don't love this pick unless you want to just a quick, okay, let's just grab a bit of cash generation and get out of it in some time. But even then, he's still very expensive. Where there are again guys that I mentioned in the top 5 here that are cheaper than him that probably have a more consistency with their role, and again, probably have a better ceiling and better floor than what Fraser does, because he does drop 50s and 40s every so often. So not a huge fan of it this week, and I'll be honest. A guy like McInerney did drop off a little bit from my top 5 here. It's just getting a bit more pricey than what I'd want to pay up for him, and probably didn't do as well as I wanted him to do in a very nice matchup. But again, he's still a very viable option. Again, you're probably paying for what you're going to get, so he's still there in that matchup. Zach Bailey, I wouldn't be going there. I think he's had a bit of a luxury role over the last couple of weeks with McCluggage out, playing a sort of that extra midfielder. But once McCluggage comes back, everyone's going to be shuffled down and he gets pushed to the forward line again. I just don't see him getting those big scores that we've been seeing so far. So I wouldn't be going there. And that's probably about it. I'm not, as much as I love Conor McDonald, I wouldn't be trading into him. He's doesn't have the role that we're looking for. He's just being quite good on the outside, getting plenty of marks, getting involved in the changes through to goal. And he's had some decent matchups to come. That's so far this season that has been pretty fruitful for him. But he does have the Western Bulldogs this weekend, which will be a tougher one for him. So not going there. If you don't have a Flanders, I don't know what you're doing here. You could go there, I guess, but that's a very odd one. But that's probably getting way too unique now. Only 300 people doing that. So that is probably it for the forwards. Let's quickly do the rookies. I think that's probably the next best thing to do. Let's go custom. I hate doing this every single time because it's painful, but that's okay. So my number 1 trade-in for the Rooks is none other than Jacob Farah. I think he is just a must-have this week. I was a little bit worried of how he was going to score when he came into the side, just due to the fact that he wasn't scoring particularly well when it came to the preseason games. I think he had like a 21, just really, really poor scoring, wasn't able to get as much ball back there, but obviously he came out in round 3, 66, did really well, and then backed it up in round 4 against the Western Bulldogs, where they just looked like they changed to a bit of a chip sort of game style, where they were just possessing the ball a lot more. Across the back half, there was a lot of defenders in that game that scored particularly well. Roberts went 130. I think Reed had like a 99 off 3 quarters, and a few others back there. So if this is what they're going to do, then you want every piece of Jacob Farrell, because he's just going to skyrocket in cash very, very quickly. A break even of -22, and he's even potentially going to be a fieldable option. Got Melbourne this weekend, a very good matchup for defenders. Went up this nearly 80k on the weekend, so yeah, he's just someone that I want every part of. And again, as we get further and further in the season, these rookies are going to come less and less through that we're going to be able to pick up. So being able to pick up a Jacob Farrow that can give us that, a good 4 or 5 week patch of cash generation means our trades are going to be easier and easier as we get deeper into the season, as he's had a delay start due to not being selected in the first couple of rounds. So that is going to help us long term. So I think he is one that we all have to grab this weekend before the round comes. But besides that, not that many people are also looking elsewhere, but I still have Josh Lindsay at number 2. I don't think many people are trading him in, probably because a lot of people have him, to be fair. I can't find him here. I'll just search him up. Maybe. Yeah, only 54 people are trading him in this week, which is just crazy for me. He's still my number 2. He's got a great matchup against the, the Cats this weekend. He's done nothing wrong besides the fact he put up a 55, so he's very consistent around that sort of 60 mark. He was probably pretty unlucky in the fact that this could have been a lot bigger because he had 4 free kicks against, which watching that game were pretty soft. As a non-owner, I was happy, but as if I was an owner, I'd be very disappointed that those free kicks were given away. I don't think he's going to get dropped. I don't think he was the worst player in their team. Yes, they got absolutely thumped, but we'll wait and see if he holds his spot. But 100%, if he's locked in that side, I think he's one that you want to have. Still making plenty of coin. Break even's pretty low as well, so be a bit more of a slow burn, but he's still going to be a very viable option. Then I went with Mitch Edwards at number 3. I think if you're looking for a bit of a downgrade or ruck shuffle with all the carnage we have at the moment with a Cherry who went down last week and an English this weekend, and you had a Mick Andrew at R3, then I think it's as simple as going one of those two down to a Mitch Edwards, running him at R3, moving a Mick Andrew onto the ground at R2 and just rolling with that. And then you can spend that money elsewhere along the field. Maybe that's going up to a Baz or moving into one of those cheaper defender guys, which we'll talk about in a second. So I really like what he was doing. His time on ground is starting to tick up more and more as he's given more responsibility in there. Yeah, and he's just doing a great job. So I think he'll be, again, a slow burn, but he's probably the better one of the bunch in terms of the Ruck rookies at this stage. So I'll be going with him. And he has a good fixture, is the other thing I forgot to mention. West Coast and then a Ruckless English at Western Bulldogs. Then even Sweet is a pretty decent matchup as well. He'll jump all over Sweet. So yeah, very good matchup. So he can make a pretty easy 100, 150k if he can put up some decent pop scores easily. So we'll see how that goes. Number 4, Oscar Steen. A lot of people jumped on him recently. He's now 20% owned. But yeah, just starting to have less and less faith in this pick that, yeah, 52 and 46 just isn't going to be enough. It's going to be a very slow burn. The time on ground just isn't there. The matchups, again, is going to be tougher against the double-headed monster of Fremantle. Then he's going into Carlton, which again is a pretty tough one against Pitnet there. So I just don't see him going that particularly well. So again, it's going to be a slow burn, and his job security may not be as locked in as what I thought it was going to be after round 3, where he did have that sort of outstanding game. He really just went back into his shell in the round 4, so not quite as comfortable there. But then you got number 5, Lockie Goblin. I think is how you pronounce it. First game at Gold Coast for the year. Had a really outstanding game. 22 touches, 8 marks, kicked a goal. The only concern on why he's lower on this list is the fact that with Bailey Humphries and Petrarca potentially due to come back very shortly within the next fortnight, he was sort of playing that role for them where he was that sort of half-forward damaging player, getting involved in linkages and doing that sort of stuff. So can he hold his spot when they come back? I'm not too sure. They'd have to move the magnets around to find him another position because he's not holding those 2 players out without a shadow of doubt. They come back in without hesitation. So it's just whether he finds himself in another position. Maybe that's a Lombard that gets dropped and he fills that role. or elsewhere on the field. So that's why I just don't quite have the confidence with his job security at this stage to be selecting him. Same with like a leak. I know a lot of people are trading him in this week with 2K doing it. I just don't quite see him having the job security that we think he has. He's always been that sort of whipping boy for the last couple of years where he just hasn't been able to stay on the side, or his role has been flying around. He's more of a midfielder in the twos, but he's playing as a small defender at this stage, but he's also played as a small forward at times. So I just don't know if I see him staying in the team long term. So I'm just not quite sure I'm quite there yet on him as a rookie downgrade selection. They do have a couple other guys back there that could easily take that defensive role off him with with a few other rookies in that space. So I just don't know if I'm going there this week, but it does have a great matchup, I won't lie. And we do know how well he can score when he is given the opportunity. So he's not a bad one, but again, I just don't have the confidence with him yet. And again, I don't think he's going to get away from us this weekend. I think we could easily pick him up next week, whereas these other guys that I mentioned here probably could have a pretty big pop score or are already more expensive. That this is probably the last week you can pick them up, like your Farahs, like your Lindsays, because they're going to be 450, if not 500k next week, which is just becomes too expensive. Whereas I expect the league to be around that 350 mark if he does have a pop score where we can still grab him next week. But yeah, that's probably about it. A few of these other guys I wouldn't be too interested in. They're just not the guys that I'd be looking to grab at all. So that will probably do it for those ones. Let's get out of this if I can. And we'll go into the Ruck line. We'll touch on this real quick because this is probably the biggest talking points. But there's only really a couple options that we need to really address. It is the conversation between Brodie Grundy and Max Gawn. I touched on this a little bit in my team review video yesterday, Monday? Yeah, Monday night, where I obviously have the English issue and I was debating who I'm going to. I think the option is you're paying 200 grand more for a Max Gawn over a Brodie Grundy. You're probably absolutely going to get some reward out of that because he has been by far the best ruckman so far this year, averaging way over any other ruckman so far this year, right? It's just whether you're willing to pay up that much. I've played the game so far this year is I'm just focusing on value because my team value probably isn't where I want it to be. I'm not within the top 10k of the team values. I'm only at 22.7 or something like that. Whereas a lot of other teams are in the 23 millions, if not even 23.5 millions, we're at the very top end. So my team value isn't where I want it to be. And if your team value is like mine, I do recommend focusing on the cheaper options, saving that coin so you can use that elsewhere to have the flexibility to use that money to bring in the better players as the weeks sort of develop over the next couple of weeks. Because no doubt we're going to have more forced trades. We're going to have, start to actually roll into players where we're going to start to actually look to upgrade season, right? We're going to look to jump off all these rookies that are making coins starting to peak out, and we want to jump on the best players we can that are in a decent range. And you don't want to have, a week where you're not going to have enough money to get to the next best player that you really want, but then you have to settle for sort of the next best that you're not super comfortable with, because that can lead you to go to a player that you don't want, and they can easily fail quite easily. So I think that 200k can definitely be used elsewhere. If you told me at the start of the season who's going to be better, the ruckman out of Max Gawn or Brodie Grundy, I think we all comfortably had Brodie Grundy as the number one ruckman alongside Tim English this year. All right, I think we all agreed on that when it was a preseason. Obviously, that's 4 weeks in the past now, and Max Gawn's come out and said, "Nah, stuff is I'm still the number one ruck in the competition for fantasy," and he's absolutely killing it. And we shouldn't be surprised. He's obviously a generational ruckman. Doesn't matter how old he's getting, he's still just getting it done. He's still having a huge amount of time on ground. He's taking marks absolutely everywhere. Getting on the scoreboard and obviously dominating in the ruck as he usually does. So I think we comfortably say now Max Gawn's definitely in that conversation. But when you're talking about 200k, which you roughly put as 20 points, right? Just say every 100k is 10 points. That's the general rule of things. I wouldn't have Max Gorn 20 points above Brody Grundy for the year. I think Brody Grundy is undervalued at what he's at currently. Again, priced at about that $1 million figure. He's priced at about 100. We know this guy can average 130 for an extended period of time. He is the ruck pick at the end of the day. He showed that at the end of the last year, sorry, where from the mid-season he went massive, like just crazy. Like look at the numbers. From round 10 onwards, he just had an absolute field day. So if he's going to be able to get back to that, which there's no guarantee, right? But we know how good he is. The role hasn't changed for him. He just hasn't had that, you know, hasn't quite got the scoring that we quite hoped for so far this season. Besides the one game, right, against the one opponent who's a really tough game style, where it was the Brisbane Lions. They hold off a lot quite significantly. Darcy Fort's very, very strong in the ruck, and then you got Draper. I think he did play in that game. I can't recall exactly, but yeah, they're a pretty tough matchup for him. So 51, while it is super disappointing, it probably wasn't unexpected. I would have expected a 70 at the least, but even like the Hawks, they obviously have a double ruck matchup now, and that an 88, you definitely take that against those guys. But he showed on the weekend when the matchups do come, he is still the ruck pig. 28 touches, 4 marks, 5 tackles. He's got the thirst for it. The hit outs are there. So I still, in my point of view, I am going Brody Grundy. Without even hesitation of doubt, going over him over a Max Gorn. But I can see the reason why people want to go with a Max Gorn. If your team is in a much better position than mine and you have the team value, you've got all the main rookies, you're heading in the right direction, and you had that extra spare coin, then I have absolutely no problem with you spending up going to Max Gorn. You know, he's again, the generational ruckman. He's shown the capacity to be able to score this way. He's going to be a great captain option, probably a better captain option than what Brody Grundy is going to be long term, unless we start to have some more confidence with what Brody Grundy's doing. But yeah, Max Gorn's obviously the viable option. The much better matchup this weekend, I must say, against Essendon. Yes, probably Blackstone. He has been a pretty restrictive ruckman so far this season, but Brody Grundy does have Wits, who, again, we always expect him to be a tough matchup, as he has been for the past 5-6 years, however long he's been in the competition. But Max Gorn did show that he's able to put up a very good score against a Wits in that matchup. So, and we consider Brody Grundy in a very similar category as Max Gorn, as a Robert Brackman. So, I don't have any doubts that Brody Grundy can go well against Wits this weekend. So, for me, I've got Brody Grundy at number 1, just saving that extra 200k. But I have Max Gorn just behind him at number 2, because I think with the carnage we have, moving off English, you're just going to the top. You don't want to be messing around with these middle price options for too long, because that's where you can be caught up in this state where you just constantly turn over ruckman. I've been caught up in that in the last couple of years, where I think it was 2024. I think I started Brody Grundy. He just, when he went over to Sydney, he just didn't perform too well. I jumped off him. I went to Rowan Marshall. Then he had an injury. Then I had to go over to Tristan Cherry, I think it was, after he had a breakout season. And then, he went down with an injury. Then I had to go to Max Gorn. I just kept turning over Ruckman consistently. So I'd rather just go to the top, be done with it, and not have to worry about it for the remainder of the season. So that's why I have those two at the top. But if you're not in that scenario where you have the money to do something else, maybe you're using the money elsewhere, then I have thrown a few other options at you here that I have looked into. So I've gone TDK at number 3. Now, he's probably not the biggest name that you would be looking into, but he's got great matchups coming up. So he's got John Sweet this weekend. Very nice matchup for there. He actually has a very nice run for probably the next 5 or 6 weeks. Quite comfortably. So Jordan Sweet, easy matchup, should be able to jump all day over him. Lockie McAndrew is an easy matchup, even though you figure him to be a bit of a tougher one. He is actually quite an easy matchup, and a lot of the other ruckmen are scoring well against him. So expecting a TDK to be able to go quite well. Obviously, Flynn is the easiest matchup by far. Pitto, again, he'll be able to jump over him all day and be able to beat him around the ground, so he should be able to get involved. Same with a Wits. You have him covered around the ground quite comfortably and should have the leap. And then he's going into maybe a Nankervis. Whether he's back in time for that matchup, who knows? So he does have a pretty good run for a little while. So he could be that stock filler for you for a little while, where he's actually been quite okay so far this season. You know, he's gone 84, 84, and a 90. Again, against some decent opponents. You got Darcy Cameron in the first round, Max Gorn in round 2, so that's a very tough matchup. And he did quite well there. Then you had the likes of Briggs, I believe, in this matchup. Still put 21 touches on him and had some quite a good game. He just had that tougher game against the Brisbane Lions, who again are probably the hardest matchup in the competition for Ruckman. So I decided to look away from this one as much as possible and really focus on what he's doing in the first couple. So if he can average 90 for you over the next couple weekends, he is probably 5 points undervalued. You can make a bit of coin, put decent amount of points on field for you, and maybe even have put up a few pop scores for the next probably 6 weeks or so. So it could be that sort of stock filler guy that you could run with a little bit, and then maybe you could jump on, say, a Tim English when he bottoms out after he returns from injury, after he gets his break even back into that shape of things. Maybe you just want a bit more of a look at a Brody Grundy while he is cheaper. You know, there's a lot of different scenarios, but if you don't have the 150k to go to a Brody Grundy this weekend, TDK is probably the next best option that I've looked into. Besides that, you do have a Luke Jackson. However, he is only 40k cheaper than a Brody Grundy. So if you did have that 40k sparing, which most people would, I'd just be going to Brody Grundy every single day. I think he's probably going to be 10, if not 15 points better than what a Jackson's going to be for the season long look, because yeah, he's besides that great score he had in round 1 where he was a solo ruckman, he's now come back to earth with Sean Darcy back into the side, taking a bit more of that main ruck role. And yeah, Jackson's sort of just becoming that sort of 90 to 95 guy that we sort of expected him to be, which we sort of know he was going to be looking at the end of last season when he sort of took that role. So he's going to have his good days, he's going to have his bad days. So he's there as another option, but he's not my favorite one because you are paying what you're going to get. I don't see him being undervalued, whereas I think Brody Grundy is undervalued at this stage. So I pay up a little bit to get that one done. And the other one who is again cheaper but not super cheap is Jordan Sweet. He's been okay to start the season. You know, Blackstone was a tough matchup. As much as he doesn't feel like he has been a very restricted ruckman again so far this season. If not, even bring it up for you here. He's obviously kept English to 51 before he went injured. Cherry 55. Obviously, there was circumstances to that as well. Again, Sweet against him was the 67 there, who actually has been the top scorer against Blackstone so far this season. And then you had Lloyd Meek at Hawthorn there, put up a 65 against Blackstone as well. So there has been no scores over 70 from a ruckman against Blackstone so far this season. So a 67 isn't too bad at the end of the day. And he's put up some decent scores against Flynn and obviously a ruckless sort of Richmond matchup, so they are an easy ones. But again, if you can get him to average 80 over the next period of time where he does have some okay matchups, you know, particularly looking at TDK should be okay. That's a pretty fruitful matchup. Obviously, the Cats matchup is just by far one of the easiest. Again, I'm talking about McAndrew is one that's easy. So if you wanted to put him for just a 4-week patch to get you through, then he's another option if you didn't have the money. So there's just a couple of options that you could be looking at there. So yeah, that's probably about it. I already sort of explained the other scenario though. If you did have McAndrew at R3, I think it's as simple as just trading into either a red dot, which would be Barnett, in my opinion, or going to one of the other, you know, rookie rucks that are sort of generating some cash for you if you don't need the looping option going forward. You know, we have a Murdoch for a little while. I have a Vizentini on the bench, so I don't quite need a red dot. But if you're not in that scenario, I definitely could advocate for someone to trade in a red dot, because now that we're over best 18s, we're not going to have the buy players to be able to put the Cs on. So having those options for the next sort of 8 weeks before we head into the mid-season buys, it's going to be handy for you to be able to hit your VCs quite comfortably. So please consider that. But that is probably the rucks done. Let's quickly touch on the the midfielders here. Just touching on them pretty quickly. So my number one midfield option this weekend has to be Bailey Smith. And why is that? It's just, again, I spoke about this a little bit last week. It's just he is going to be super consistent and be able to hit these ceilings quite consistently. He's probably one of the only players that I'd pay up for that he is so expensive. But he has a great matchup this weekend against West Coast. He loves playing them. He dominates against them just every single time. He did miss them, I think, end of last season, I think it was. So if I look back to last season, he scored a 147 against them in round 12. Didn't play them again for the remainder of the season because I think he missed them in like round 16 or 17, something like that. I believe, or maybe he just didn't play them again. But yeah, dominated against them. They're a good matchup. So I just don't see him going backwards anytime soon. They do have a pretty decent stretch of games coming up as well. So he's going to be a great captain option where I'm not diving into captains just yet. It is a pretty tough week for captains, I will say. So if you did have the luxury of being able to, throw a few things around, maybe you have the DPP to be able to throw English into a midfielder instead, then I'd lean to going to Bailey Smith right up top of the tree because he's going to be a great option and he's just super consistent at this stage. Besides that 80 he scored in round one, where he was sort of moved around, whether that was due to illness or whatnot. He's just been unstoppable so far with 130, 154, 124, and some decent structures of games with some tougher opponents. So in these easy ones, he's just going to go massive. So I think he's a viable option just to pay out for. Number two, I still have Jack Steele. Starting to get a bit pricey now for what you sort of expect him to be, because he's probably going to be more of a 105 to 110 sort of player. You are now paying about 110 for him, so he's about fair game for what you're going to get. But again, pretty good matchup against Essendon. They are the number one matchup for midfielders specifically, but they also don't concede a huge amount of tackles, which we know Jack still sort of thrives on for his scoring ability. So I don't know if I'm expecting a massive score from him this weekend, unless he does a lot of the, spread work that he can get a lot of marks on the outside, because we do know they concede a lot of marks. But I still think he's a very viable option, just a very safe pick. You're going to get what you pay for. He's going to be there or thereabouts in terms of the top 8 midfielders. And he's much cheaper than the other guys that we're sort of looking at this week that I don't fully have a lot of faith in. He's 120k cheaper than Bailey Smith. But yeah, so again, I have a lot of faith in Bailey Smith at this stage. Number 3, I have got Finn Callahan coming off the bye. Again, he is slightly more, even cheaper than a Steele, but I feel like he's just that tag option at GWS, so I had to drop him down that one spot. But he's been pretty good so far this season. Besides sort of that first week blunder where he came back from what was it a calf injury or something like that? He came back from a preseason injury anyway, so he wasn't fully ripe. Yeah, he had a lower time on ground. But since then he's been pretty strong with 109, 98, and 116. And the run is pretty strong from here on out. Richmond North is sort of a bit of tough matchup. Not too bad there. Gold Coast are quite a contested game, so you could get a lot of tackles there. Obviously, Essendon and West Coast are in there as well. Melbourne, St Kilda. It's just got to worry about the tag options is the only thing I have with him and why he's further down on this list. Tag options are going to potentially come his way because there is no Tom Green alongside him unless they chose to go with, maybe a Lockie Ash tag or a Toby Green tag in the forward line instead. But he is the guy to be tagging in the midfield at the moment, even with a Clayton Oliver alongside him. So maybe a James Jordan could do that job in round 6. Finn O'Sullivan has been doing a lot of that tag role for North so far this season, but he's potentially out for 2 to 3 weeks with, what was it, a head knock, a broken jaw, I think it was actually. So he's may not be in for that game. Besides that, you're waiting along down the track before it starts to get into those tag options. So I think you'll have a decent stretch over the next 6 weeks. So I think he's a decent a decent option to trade in this weekend and hold him for a decent period of time. Number 4, I did have Isaac Heaney. Just he's very cheap for what I expect him to be. I think he's shown more than enough so far this season. Besides that injured game of 60% time on ground and 65 score. He's just hitting the scoreboard. He's got the right role. He looks back to being prime Heaney, where he's just marking everything and tackling everything. And you got to think this was lower time on ground because they rested him for the last 15 odd minutes in that game. That could have easily been a 150 for him. And again, I spoke about the nice run of fixture for Sydney when we were looking at Errol Goulden and McInerney. Obviously, Heaney has the exact same fixture, so he has got a pretty nice run. So I think he's one that if you wanted to shop around in this cheaper zone, I don't know if he's going to get much cheaper than what he is currently. Where, yeah, he's sub $1 million. I think he could easily jump up to being that $1 million player this weekend against GWS, where he will just tackle everything. So I really like him at number 4. And then I've thrown in Will Ashcroft at number 5. He probably could have been higher on this list, but I think he's getting a bit pricey now for what I expect him to be. As good as he has been, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Will Ashcroft hater. I love what he can do, and I think he's a phenomenal player. The hierarchy at Brisbane is just not in his favour, with McCluggage potentially coming back very shortly. I see him being that 4th midfielder again, behind Neil, behind Dunkley, behind McCluggage, and that just leads him to not having as much opportunity to be able to put up these consistent scores as what we have seen in the last couple of weeks without McCluggage, and he can drop those 60s quite frequently. So I just don't see him being a long-term pick, whereas the other guys I've mentioned here are long-term holds where their role is consistent and it's going to stay that way for a long period of time. Besides that, Sarong's still a very viable option, very similar sort of price tag as a Heaney. He's been very solid so far this season, besides the one game that he was tagged out of. But yeah, again, that's obviously going to happen every from time to time. Potentially going to be a Perryman tag this weekend from the Pies. We have seen that previously. But besides that, I don't see too many other tags coming. Maybe Devin Robertson when he's back. Maybe. I don't think Colton are doing any tag work at the moment. So, you got to take the good with the bad with a Sarong. He's going to be good at some stages, but he's also going to be bad. But I think he's overall going to be averaging around that sort of 100 mark, which is still more than what he's priced at this stage. So he still presents a little bit of value with some decent matchups to come. And I do expect him to have an okay game as long as he doesn't get tagged against Collingwood there. Holmes is another good option that I probably could have slotted him into top 5. There are a few decent options here, but with the news of him having a broken finger, I don't know how much that's going to affect him, and he is a bit more pricey now. So you're probably paying what you're going to get for him with a decent matchup, so don't mind him there. But that's probably about it. I've probably spent enough time on them. We'll move on to the defensive line and just quickly recap a lot of what's happening here. So number 1 for me in the defensive line, I have gone Nick Newman. It was very tight. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of great options in the defensive line at the moment with all the guys here. Nick Newman, Kobe McKercher, Riley Bice, Kitty Coleman. All of them are great options, right? I just sort of had to split hairs between who I expect to be better long term. And I think Nick Newman probably has the biggest ceiling of all of these guys at the moment. We've seen it in the past where he has been a primo scoring ruck for us. Back in 2024, I believe it was. He just went absolutely massive towards the back end of the season. So he sort of slotted back into that role at halfback, just continued where he left off. Had lower time on ground than what we normally would see him, but obviously easing him back into the season, so that will tick up as time goes on. He obviously was the guy back there, took 9 marks. It was probably a bit more of an uncontested game at halfback. A lot of defenders scored well in this game, particularly for Colton. So Could be a bit of a red herring. I don't think he's going to go away from us this weekend. He's still very cheap. I also find it funny how he scored a 92 and went back 6k. I just don't get how that's possible when he's priced down at like 77 or something like that, something ridiculous. So tell me how that works when you score 15 above your price stat and you went down. So very odd, but yeah, I really like what he can potentially do this year. He's going to be that main guy back there. So I think his ceiling is just going to be super high. So he'd be someone that I'm looking at trading into in next weekend, hopefully, as long as we don't get too much carnage and things pan out the way that I want them to. Then I had Kobe McKercher at number 2. He's, again, just a super safe guy that we know what we're going to get from him. He had a phenomenal first half in that game against Carlton. Sort of dropped off in the second half as it became a bit more of a chip fest in the back half of Carlton's game. They sort of picked up the tackling pressure, so that meant Kobe McKercher didn't have quite as much space as what he did in the first half, and there wasn't just as much ball in that back defensive 50 as what there was in the first half, so meant him sort of dropped off. But he also has a tougher matchup this weekend against Brisbane Lions. So again, I don't think he's going to be one that gets away from this weekend. So again, could be another one that we look to trade in next week. But yeah, looks to obviously have that to roll at halfback, so going to be a phenomenal pick. I've gone really biased at number 3 over Kitty Coleman, just due to how consistent he's been. You know, since round 1, 103, 87, and 108 has been a phenomenal start for him. He seems to have that role as the first distributor for Sydney, so he's not taking kick-ins, but he's sort of receiving all the kick-ins. So he's getting that extra +3 each possession. So he's just racking up the disposals back there, getting the marks, and finding a way to get it done. So yeah, he's super cheap, rising up in coin really, really quickly. So I really like him as an option. The only thing is that the run isn't great for the next couple. It opens up a little bit when he gets to the Bulldogs. So you have to sustain a little bit of hurt for the next couple of weeks. But again, he's still rising up in cash really quickly, that I think he could be a 90 player. Priced down about 75. He's got 15 points of upside to go there. Number 4, I'd had Kitty Coleman. It's probably due to the fact that he just has way too many guys around him. You know, at any given week, a Zorko could pop off, a Fletcher, Wilmont. Any one of those guys can have a good game, and that means Kitty Coleman may not have the most phenomenal game of his life, where he's, in the last couple of weeks, he has been really, really strong. So I just don't know if I quite trust it at this stage, even though he is by far cheaper than the rest of these guys. He's still an option for us down the track. I just don't know if I see him being that pick consistently, whereas I see a bit more consistency in the other guys above him at this stage. So looking at a lot of the value there. Besides that, I have thrown in one of the primo guys if you are just looking to pay up this weekend, and that is just Lockie Ash, in my opinion. I think he's taken that mantle from a Whitfield at this stage. As an owner of both, I've been watching them pretty closely each and every week, and by far, Whitfield's taking the kick-ins, but Lockie Ash is always receiving the kick-ins, so he's getting a lot more of those marks. He's seemingly being like the first one that they look to when they are looking for an inside kick to be that main distributor. So they're always looking for him, so he's getting plenty of marks. So I think his floor is going to be a lot higher than what a Lockie Whitfield is, who has been pretty underwhelming so far this season, besides that 129. So yeah, while I think Whitfield's probably a bit more value than what a Lockie Ash is, I think I have more confidence in what a Lockie Ash is going to be this year and be closer to that 105, 110 guy rather than a Lockie Whitfield who is, again, priced at about that 105 at the moment. I don't know if I quite see him being that 105 guy so far this year, so far this season. But again, they do both have a very phenomenal runs for the rest of the season, or it's at least the mid-season buys. So both of them are viable options, but I just have Lockie Ash as just ahead of Lockie Whitfield at this stage. I'm not convinced on Nasiah just yet. I still think he's coming down in coin. I haven't seen enough for him to prove to me that he's going to be a top 6 defender for the year. Not doubting his talent by any stretch of imagination, but he's going to get a lot of attention every single week, so he's not shown that he's able to get through that yet, even against some of the poorer teams. So I just don't have confidence that he's one that I'd be trading into just yet without him starting to really overcome these tags and start to become that dominating possession player, because he doesn't tackle. He relies on a lot of marks, and he's not quite getting that space done at the moment with a player hanging off of him at any point throughout the season. And that's probably about it. It's probably getting fairly unique now. But let's quickly wrap up trade mode, and then I'll quickly dive into captain. So my top 5 trade-ins for the week are Jacob Farrow. I think he's just by far the number 1 pick that we need to grab this week. Again, must-have rookie at that price range. You can't get him next week because he's going to be way too expensive, and he's going to go skyrocket this weekend. So I think you make it a priority to get him in one shape or another. Then I had, again, with the carnage of English, I had to throw in a ruckman here. So I've gone Brodie Grundy just ahead of Max Gawn. So them two pretty closely together. Again, I've explained why I think this is the case, but I'm just leaning to Brodie Grundy over a Max Gawn at this stage. Just the price difference is too hard to ignore for me. But then I've gone with Bailey Smith at number 4. Again, just paying up for that premium, who's going to go ballistic, be a good crack captain option for you for a decent stretch of time, where a lot of our captain options have sort of faded away with a lot of the injuries we've had so far with Rosie, Golden, English, even if you want to throw a Petrarca in there. All these guys have gone injured. I probably missed 1 or 2 in there as well. Even a Butters, while it has been super underwhelming, Sheasel has shown some cracks in what he's being able to do after last weekend. So we are starting to struggle with some captain options. So I definitely like Bailey Smith as a trading option this weekend at number 4. And then I've thrown in another ruckman in Mitch Edwards at number 5 as sort of that downgrade option, because I do know a lot of people that have McAndrew at R3. So again, that's a very simple scenario, just moving McAndrew into R2, and you need to trade in a ruckman to be able to put him on field. So simple as that. So hopefully that covers off any questions for trade mode. Again, I'll try my best to answer all your questions before tomorrow night, but I will be pretty busy, so I do apologize if I don't get to all your questions. But now let's jump into captains, just to cap off my captains this week. So this is normally my captains video. If you don't watch along, I go through and list my top 5 captains for the week. I'll only be doing 5 this week just due to time constraints. I normally do 10, but considering this has already been over an hour video, I will keep this brief. So my number 1 captain is none other than Bailey Smith. I think I've touched on him enough so far this week. But again, he scored a 147 against West Coast Eagles last season, and we've seen some massive scores against West Coast so far this season, with Isaac Heaney with about 126 last weekend. That could have been a 150 quite easily. Harry Sheezer the week prior to that was a 128. Then you had CP3 and Noah Anderson, both went like 110 ranges. So they are just giving up plenty of points to midfielders. And Baz, we know he loves to rack up at the best of times, so he's by far number 1. Number 2, I have gone with Jack Steele. Again, he's been phenomenal start of the season, super consistent. He's getting the job done, and Essendon are the number 1 matchup for midfielders throughout the start of the season. I can run through some scores here. I've already mentioned it so far in this video, but Bontempelli 130, Sheezer 136, Butters 144, and a guy like a Josh Ward from Hawthorn 107. So all went massive, and that was just the top scorers of each of those games. So obviously, some of their teammates like a Kennedy went 108 or something like that. LDU 125. Rosie, as I mentioned, was on track for a 130 as well in that game against them. So they are just giving up plenty of points to midfielders at this stage. So I think Jack still will get involved in that in some shape or form. I don't maybe see a 130 from him, but I still see him being a consistent 110 sort of guy. So I think I'm slotting him in there. Yeah, in a tougher week, I think we can slot him in there quite comfortably. Number 3, I have gone with Max Gawn. He probably could have been number 2, but I do just have some concerns with the Blackstone matchup. As I mentioned throughout this video, he has been very restrictive, with no ruckman going over 70 so far this week, and that has been with some very good ruckman going up against him, like Cherry, like English. Even Lloyd Meek has been a decent scoring ruckman in the past. just not getting it done. So even in English on the weekend, he was on 51 with 53% time on ground. So that was probably on track for an 80. That's definitely subpar from what we would expect from a Team English. So I just don't know if I see a massive score from Max Gorn this week, but how can you doubt Max Gorn? He has been phenomenal so far this season, and he averages 112 against Adelaide Ovals in his career. So if you think how long his career has been, if he's averaging 112 there, he loves the ground, so he should be pretty good there. So again, if you're trading him in, definitely a viable option. Number 4, I have gone with Lockie Ash. It's pretty vanilla captains this weekend. I haven't really thrown any spicy ones in there, as I haven't probably had as much time as I wanted to do a lot of the research. But Lockie Ash is my number 4. Again, Richmond matchup should be pretty fruitful. He went 112 against them last season, and they have been giving up some decent scores so far this year. Nothing outstanding, but we do know that they are quite a fruitful matchup. And again, Lockie Ash is the guy back there, so he will probably might be my captain this weekend. And then I've thrown in Max Holmes at number 5. Again, very vanilla. Even with that finger issue, I don't think it's going to stop him. West Coast, great matchup. It's not too hard to explain why he's part of that category. But a couple other ones I should mention. A guy like Sarong, as I mentioned, against the Pies. If he doesn't get tagged, I think he could definitely have a pretty fruitful day. Vice versa, Nick Dacos, if he returns, he could have a pretty good day. But again, I could see him being tagged against a Wagner. So keep an eye on that one. He's done that job in the past. Zorko, I'm not hot on at the moment. The North matchup is one of the tougher ones at the moment running around. And Zorko's obviously shown some signs that he has some vulnerability to his game. He was not on track for a good score before three-quarter time last weekend. Jordan Dawson's a decent one. I probably should have looked into him a bit more, but could see him getting a bit of attention there, as other guys have been going to him every so often. Whitfield, as I mentioned, I think Lockie Ash is just ahead of him at the stage, but Whitfield's still a very viable option if you don't own him. Bontempelli, I just think Hawthorn will put a lot of time into him. Nash is usually the best matchup for him. He's got the height, he's got the speed, and he's got that tackling pressure, so he will keep him accountable all day, and he doesn't average too well against him. Sinclair has been phenomenal so far this season, but Port Adelaide are the toughest matchup for designated kick-out players so far this season, so I don't see him having a massive game there. But again, Sinclair has been phenomenal, so he should be good. Cozzy Pickett is an interesting one because I wouldn't have the balls to put the captaincy on him, but he does play early enough in the week that you could throw the VC on him, as long as you're comfortable with what your C is going to be. So obviously, if you have a Baz or a Holmes, you could easily roll into one of those guys after him, but he could have an absolute field day. But that's probably where I'll finish off today's video. So again, that's my top 5 captains. Hopefully you guys go well this weekend. Hopefully you're getting around to gather around and getting over to Adelaide, and hopefully you can see me around town every so often. I will be in and around doing bits and bobs with a few of the other content creators guys, and I will be at a lot of the games this weekend. So come up, say hello, and I'm happy to have a chat every so often. But again, leave your questions down below. I'm more than happy to answer them before tomorrow night. But yeah, hopefully you guys have a great night, and I will see you later. Cheers, guys.